Alright people, let's do this one last time. Really. And end it on better terms. If you've seen my previous video, you'll note that it was my first response video ever. Honestly, I kinda wish that staple went to another video, but it is what it is. To quickly bring us up to speed, someone named Ultimate Joker made a video on why Peter was nerfed in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Another guy named Krispy gave a response to it to debunk the claim by explaining the context for the scenes used, and me being who I am, wanted to dive into the drama. So I made a response video to his response video, and he responded to that, which I really didn't think he'd do. I don't know how he, let alone anyone else, found me, but I can't say I wasn't shocked when I saw the thumbnail, and my thumbnail in the video. He did give me credit though, so we learned from last time to at least credit those who your video is based upon. So he made a response to my response of his response, and initially I wasn't even going to make this video. I just was gonna lay out my points in a comment underneath his, but I decided screw it. There's a reason why this will be the last response and why I'll be taking a different approach than last time. I like to think I was pretty calm in my last video in terms of how aggro one could come off in a video, and I want to be even more calm. And I won't be directly responding to clips and just instead summarize the points that were made in the video as best as I can. What's most important is that I want to get across is that I legit want to be much more good faith than last time. I did have a bias towards what Joker says, as like I said last, I agree with most of what Joker says, and still do, as another reason why this video exists. However, I watched Krispy's video twice actually, and really tried to take in and also a step back to really think about and remember what I was arguing, what I was standing for, and why I was doing it. I think it's really important when arguing or debating with someone or any of the sort that you don't lose the plot of your own point, and I don't want to do that here. So I want to let go of some things, move past the petty or passive insults, and get to what's important, which is at least some form of better understanding to the other party. I also don't want to go around in circles either, as response after response after response will only get us so far. Rappers having beef with other rappers and talking back and forth to each other exclusively via songs doesn't help. So I'll just say this and reiterate. This video is meant to be in good faith towards the things Krispy says, and I want to better respond to the points while elaborating on my own and pushing back and standing by my own points. If at any point I misrepresent or misinterpret any points I respond to, I'm genuinely not doing it on purpose. If you're watching, I really do want you to keep going, because even if we'll continue to disagree, there's a dialogue to be had here, and I want to have that dialogue to at least get things covered as best as possible. So without further ado, let's take more petty pleasure and petty arguments over a fictional character. I'll start with this. I can't help but feel like Krispy did it again. The same thing he did with Joker, he did with me, misrepresenting certain points, taking a point and then blowing it out of proportion or simply strawmanning it. So when I talked about Kraven, Krispy made it seem like I had a problem with him nearly dying or struggling when it comes to his bigger villains. The problem isn't that Spider-Man's nearly dying to his villains. The problem is that in this instance, Spider-Man's getting tossed around so hard that it can't help be seen as kind of embarrassing. And perhaps this is the point of the newest game trying to convey, as a part of a character arc for Spider-Man, to feel like nothing without the symbiote. I'm willing to grant you that, but it could still be handled a lot better and without making him look or come off so bad. In Kraven's case, he still gets one-shotted. One hit and that's all. I wouldn't even frankly be that bothered by it if we at least got some scenes where Spider-Man actually got good hits, but he doesn't. In this scene, Spider-Man just looks weak against Kraven. Even if you want to insist that Kraven is stronger than Spider-Man in this universe exclusively, it's just really not going to go over well when you introduce the guy killing off, or in this case, nearly killing off the main character. It can come off as disingenuous, even with the emotional reaction of the characters in this scene. My point is, even if it's a death bait, treating your main character like this doesn't go over well, and we've had examples of this in the past. On top of that, it can really come off like this plot is giving overprops to Kraven. It's showcased for picking and choosing for him that he successfully beats most of the Sinister Six, yet is only seen to be vulnerable when getting his ass kicked by someone infected by the symbiote, which is why I said what I said in the prior video. If he's beating literally everyone and everything else in the prior game, yet only losing to the symbiote, it's hard to say that he can lose to anything but that. Krispy then uses this logic as another straw man to rail on me throughout this, instead of tackling what I stated. He twists the logic and applies it to everything else as a way to make it easier to attack my point. On top of it, this problem sets stage in this game, and this aspect was specifically what I was referring to. And I gotta say, it's weird how people, not specifically Krispy, will defend Spider-Man consistently getting fucked up against everyone in the newest game, yet Kraven beating all the last game's villains with no sweat is perfectly fine and no one bats an eye. Another point Krispy makes here is that since it's a fictional world, anything can happen, no matter how contradictory. Look, it is a fictional world, and you should be willing to suspend your disbelief on these things when the circumstances allow. I'm fine with this, but what I'm not fine with is this being used as an excuse to justify making an average human OP as hell in the game he's fucking introduced in. On top of that, when we break the rules we created in these stories, there's an issue on that front too, and there's nothing wrong with calling that out. It also ruins every argument in that case, because when this all hinges on whatever the writers want that day, the power scaling arguments you want to make mean less than nothing.
Krispy here is aware the power scaling is ridiculous. He says so himself. So he's willingly rejecting the complaint that Kraven, a normal dude with training, shouldn't be this strong to begin with.
I'm willingly rejecting it because this is a superhuman world. Who's to say this man can't be this strong?
Well, who's to say Spider-Man can't beat Kaiju Sandman alone or with one shot? Who's to say Spider-Man can't just smack Venom and he instantly explodes and the game ends in an hour? I obviously don't think about it like this, and that's not me fishing for a gotcha. I'm just pointing out how you can't use that point like that because it just doesn't work when you make other arguments, like why the villains in this game are of a higher threat, or your argument on making logical assumptions about these characters' skill level. Another petty one, you compared the fridge scene to the scene where Spider-Man gets knocked down after confronting Martin Lee and the demons as if they're one-to-one, when in that same sequence, it's actually showing the latter was handled better. In that shot, not only does Spider-Man get up and fight off the bad guys, but he's also pinned by an object that likely weighs more than the fridge. And Spider-Man's got negative glow around his wrists as he tries to shoot a web, in which it's fair to conclude that Mr. Negative's powers were also holding him off for a bit too. To add on to this, I pointed out how it's just flat out fucked for Peter to just stand there and watch as Venom has his way with MJ no pause, and Krispy's response was the same response everyone gave, that Peter didn't rush in because Venom could have instantly killed her right then and there. But that's such a cop-out defense because it's giving an excuse for why Spider-Man isn't allowed to look like he can fight. I don't agree at all with Krispy on this. I would have much rather seen Spider-Man attack Venom in this moment, and I'm sure a lot of people would have preferred that too, because it could have ended the same way regardless, with MJ becoming Scream. But when he responded to the point I made, he still used the straw man from earlier, saying in sarcasm that it's easy to make logical assumptions, but avoids doing the same thing for Web of Shadows, saying that there's no way to know if Peter was holding back against the symbiote-infected Black Cat in that game. But I don't think that really matters if he was holding back or not, because in cutscenes before, during, and after gameplay, Spider-Man's actually fighting back and looking good. On top of that, the game makes it a point that Spider-Man wins his fights here. Against Scream in the newest game, Spider-Man gets smacked around so hard people still make jokes about it. And I'll even grant you what you said before, that he's holding back because it is ugly Mary Jane, who Spider-Man naturally cares for and loves the most. But I still stand by my point that this fight can be conveyed while giving the best of both worlds, the emotions of the characters, and Spider-Man's skill as well as the threat of Scream. And hell, this can be much more excusable if Spider-Man looked better in other fighting cutscenes as well that weren't just against nameless jobbers. That's my entire point. One thing I want to admit that he really got me on was that there were some fights in Spectacular Spider-Man that he shouldn't have walked away from. Okay, more like one specifically, but Spider-Man's durable, so I can believe him being fine after most of these. I'm still gonna double down and be ignorant and say at the same time, while he shouldn't be all good after some of these hits, it reinforces just how satisfying it is for Spider-Man to come back from these situations on his own, something that it feels like Insomniac Spider-Man does not do, not without help at least. A big point I want to comment on is the following.
I will repeat again, he can hold back while still looking superior in the fight fight. Like Insomniac, Krispy isn't capable of understanding that a fight scene doesn't have to be overly one-sided. All you have to do is just have the fight end with Spider-Man holding back but also outplaying Wraith hand-to-hand. Why is this so hard?
This is really hard to determine in a video game. Who knows if Peter used most of his skills in his fight? There's gameplay in between. All we see is the beginning and the ending.
Dude, I fucking hate the point you tried to make here as the response, and it's probably the worst one because I legit gave you a direct solution to the overall problem, yet you waved it off anyway. It is not at all hard to communicate Spider-Man's superior fighting skill over Wraith, or anyone for that matter in a video game. Yes, obviously there's gameplay, but just because it's a game doesn't mean you can't showcase things. This is what cutscenes are for, so you can communicate and showcase things happening outside of said gameplay, and they can be considered canon. It's actually annoying how you just ignored what I said here and waved it off with that blatant excuse of it's a video game, so no way. So I'll repeat it again. You can absolutely have cutscenes or QTE events to showcase sequences of how the fight went or is going, and it can help to be a showcase of the skill gaps between characters. This is important when showcasing a fight. Perfect example of how fights in these should be choreographed and how they need to be carefully crafted and executed and matter to showcase this is here in one of my favorite fight scenes ever in Kengan Ashura. In this fight, Kano Agito and Kalon Wongsawat are somewhat evenly matched, yet there's still a difference in their skill as the show expertly highlights this. Wongsawat's striking is superior to Agito's, but Agito overall skill and ability to adapt in combination with his experience allows him to keep up with Kalon despite looking bad in some regards. He's still able to go toe-to-toe with him from the beginning all the way to the very end, and even then, Kalon throughout this fight always has the edge. Every time Agito came closer, Kalon pushed back. Despite this, Agito still won the fight by resorting to a tactic that caught Kalon off guard, as he thought Agito would stick to only striking techniques, only to be fooled at the last second and be bested. The show knows what it's communicating here, and it does a very good job at it. Agito wanted to beat Kalon at his own game, but he couldn't do it, and if he stuck to those rules, he would have lost that fight. So he had to switch at the very last second, resulting in what now he feels is just a hollow victory, as that probably couldn't have happened as the outcome. I know it's weird to compare a direct video game to an anime dedicated to showcasing an art with fights and such, but it's moments like these that speak volume, even if they're subtle moments. To say that it can't be displayed in bits and pieces just because we're in a video game that involves cutscenes before, during, and after gameplay events is just simply wrong, and you're delusional if you really think otherwise. Now, there's actually a point I can't help but give Krispy his credit to. He points out that despite the differences in certain adaptations of Spider-Man, it's worth giving credit when they get certain parts of the core character correct, no matter how good or bad these portrayals are, which I actually agree with. Do I think Insomniac's version of Spider-Man captures a core attribute of Peter? Yes and no, but it is an adaptation and I can forgive this. However, I do think one core element is his single-handed determination and resilience, something I feel tends to be lacking in this version of Spider-Man ever since the first game passed. And I think Spider-Man getting his own dubs without help can help with that aspect, but with the certain direction that the Insomniac Spider-Man universe is going, it seems like that's not gonna happen anymore with Silk and Miles taking over, which I don't have a problem with, but we could still be handling our previous protagonists a little bit better in respect right now. Krispy did overall agree about why it's important to highlight criticisms for Spider-Man and other media to have a high standard and the whole spill I gave last time. And as I just stated, there are some things that I do agree with Krispy on. So from that point forward, there's only so much more we could be fighting over and we could be at it forever. The rest of the video is just Krispy responding to Joker's response with his friends. Big ups to the homie Joker, you know that's the bro. But in super fairness, it is kind of just a weird back and forth between both parties at this point that feels less like an argument and more like shit-talking sessions between the two that goes nowhere because it's filled with bad reads to and from both parties. For example, when the issue brought up by Joker's friend Resikin of this version of Spider-Man not getting a win without help, Krispy's response is that they may as well just make either the hero stronger or the villains weaker, and goes back to the different versions of different characters point, as well as how this is primarily about whether or not Peter got nerfed, and thus Krispy insists that he wasn't, and Joker and Rezakin are just actively biased. But then on the flip side, Krispy points out how hard Joker goes in on the paint on people who enjoy Spider-Man 2. And like I said in the last video, I agree with what Krispy says here. He's right. If you enjoy Spider-Man 2, that's perfectly fine. I've made a total of like 3 videos talking about Insomniac Spider-Man and plan on making a few more, but in none of them have I ever nor will ever go at someone sideways for harmlessly enjoying the game. Oddly defending it? Sure, maybe. But just casually playing it? Dude, play your game and ignore me. What do I even say? I already point out that I don't always agree with everything Joker says, but there are a lot of things that he says that I do agree with. Do I think Joker sees red when he sees an Insomniac fan? No. I agree that Joker tends to go a bit overboard. Even he admits that he can be like that, but I somehow doubt that he unironically considers anyone a fan of this game, casual or otherwise, a shitty person. And if he does, you'd have to ask him about that. I can only speak on his behalf so much. Like I said, these are just a few examples, and I highly recommend you just go watch the videos linked down below. Joker says Krispy cut context from him. Krispy insists that the context didn't really matter in those instances. Joker and Rezakin point out how overpowered MJ is. Krispy dismisses it, saying it has nothing to do with Peter and shouldn't matter, even though he actually agrees that it's dumb how strong MJ is. So it's like, what the hell are we fighting? Like I said, I really do want to be good faith to both sides a lot more than I was in the last video, but I do gotta say I love this part right here though.
This is the only Spider-Man story that can be named where he does not get a red suit one-on-one win. I think he might have cut those parts out too. Yeah, broken history. Never happened in another show, game, movie.
This is dumb. Why do you think things can't change in Spider-Man history?
Krispy. Joker in no way said or even implied that things in Spider-Man media or adaptations are not allowed to be different, nor did he say that they're bad for being different. He is pointing out that this version of the character in this game does not win anything without the black suit or help from other characters. Your response is saying that just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. You are giving a counterpoint to a point that was not originally made, and the audience eats it up. Please stop doing that. Like I said, Krispy does this multiple times. I pointed it out in my last video. He did it then, he does it now. He twists the logic in what you said and applies it to everything else as a way to make it easier to attack the point. Like I said, if I misunderstood something that either side has said, it was in no way intended or malicious. Again, I can't comment too much on the back and forth between Krispy and Joker himself. That's between them, not me. I can only do it so much at the end of the day. But I can talk more about the responses to my points. The link to all the videos in this are still in the description. You can watch them and judge for yourself. I really don't care anymore. Like I said, it's just a lot of back and forth between them, and it's never really going to get anywhere if it keeps going. But at the end of the day, for what it's really worth, I want to get somewhere in this overall, and I want it to be at least on a somewhat good note. Like I ended the last video off with, nothing is wrong with enjoying the newest Spider-Man 2 game. And I don't think it's a straight up bad game either. Again, just because I and others look at it a certain way doesn't mean you're not allowed to have fun with it. I have problems with this take on Peter and have been more aggro about it in the past, but there's aspects I'm cool with, such as Miles being the main Spider-Man in this series. I'm totally fine with that, but I'm not fine with it feeling like Peter's character is being butchered in exchange for Miles. At that point, if you disagree that Peter's character wasn't butchered for it, we're just looking at the same thing from two completely different lenses. I can't change the way you look at it, you can't change the way I look at it either. I think Peter could have looked a lot better in this game. Other people will think he's fine, and from that point, it really just is what it is. We could be at this forever, like I said, and I've covered the important points, all except for the most important point of all. Now listen, I can let it slide when you misinterpret or misrepresent what I'm saying, but I can't let this slide right here. You pronounced my goddamn name wrong.
I'm mostly gonna go over Kit and us fans video.
The hell's wrong with you? It's Katana's fans. Katana's fans. Like, bro, what was the pronunciation?
kitten ass fans? Like what? Everything I said in good faith about you is out the window. Fuck you, you washed up